Great. So welcome to Natural Ways to Support the Immune System. I'm Katie Wallace. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I'm presenting this program in cooperation with the Willy Street Co-op. I offer one of these programs on a monthly basis. So next month, we'll be talking about vitamin D. So the other thing that I do for the Willy Street Co-op is I offer one-on-one private nutrition sessions. They are just $40 now, and that price is increasing to $45 in March. So if you want to set up a one-on-one session with me in person, and I do have some Zoom sessions, a selected number of Zoom sessions every month, then we can do a private one-on-one 45-minute session at that reduced fee. So if you're interested in that, you can contact me, and that's supported by the Willy Street Co-op. So before we move ahead, I'd like to make the disclaimer that I'm sharing this information for health education reasons only, and it should not be taken as medical advice. We're going to talk about the life cycle of viruses, and then we're going to talk about ways to support the immune system with that understanding. So I'll cover a lot of the key nutrients and supplements that can be really helpful for supporting the immune system, as well as dietary key points and things that have more maybe to do with our broader lifestyle, like our access to natural light and outdoor activity, as well as stress relief and rest. So obviously the immune system does more for us than just fight viruses, but because this is a big topic and one that people typically think of in the winter season, I wanted to kind of focus on ways to support our immune systems in naturally fighting viral activity. But a lot of these things that I'm sharing today extend to other immune system issues too, like somebody with chronic allergies, somebody with gut issues, somebody with chronic inflammation, or another chronic immune challenge. So a lot of the same basic principles will apply, even though we're kind of focused on the topic of viruses. This is a picture of the life cycle of a virus. Coronaviruses, of course, are top in the news, so we'll use that as an example. You can see the picture of the virus here. I'm pointing to it with my mouse. A virus is first introduced to a human cell, and it invades the human cell with its genetic material. In the case of a coronavirus, it has what's called RNA, genetic material, and it will invade a human cell and then invade the nucleus of the cell, where it uses the host cell to copy itself or replicate itself. So it's basically creating more viral RNA and viral particles. And then the human cell dies and it releases more viruses, which continue to invade the subsequent cells in the body. And that's what becomes a viral infection. So when we're thinking about ways to support the immune system, we really want to maximize our early response to viruses. We want to do things that make our cells less penetrable, make it less likely for the virus to be able to invade and replicate itself inside that cell. And we want to increase something called a natural killer cell, which are cells that we make that help target viruses and kill them before they can invade more cells. So selenium is the first key nutrient I want to talk about. I will have a slide later that talks about dosages again for all of these, but I thought I'd put the dosages up there in case you are a numbers person. So we're looking for 40 to 70 micrograms daily. But selenium is really important in studies. It has been shown to keep animals from getting infected by coronaviruses and other viruses. So basically, animals that had low levels of selenium were more easily infected and allowed the viruses to mutate into more dangerous strains. So selenium is one key nutrient I think not everybody is aware that can really help with someone's immune performance. It's found in a lot of food. A lot of animal foods are very rich in selenium, although there are some vegetarian foods that are high in selenium as well. Beef, chicken, seafood, fish, pork, eggs are all examples of animal foods rich in selenium. I have Brazil nuts pictured here as well. And mushrooms can also be a good source of selenium. So having a diet that is based in these very nourishing foods is very helpful and supportive of a strong immune system. You can also take a selenium supplement, and I do personally take this even though I have a very high quality diet. I take selenium during times of the year or situations when I feel like there's more viral stress. So typically in the cooler weather or when my kids are coming home from school, maybe with a cold or I'm around people that might be contagious. It is important, I think, to get a good food-based selenium that's pretty easy to digest. So that supplement I was just showing is just an example of one. Obviously, the Willy Street Co-op will have other brands and other supplements, and those are fine in this case to use as well. Zinc, probably most of you are really aware already of how important zinc is, but I just couldn't give this talk without speaking about zinc for a moment. Zinc is so important because it, in many ways, helps stop the replication of the virus inside the cell. So if you have adequate zinc levels, then it's going to be like a first-line viral defense. I find that many people are deficient in zinc. You need to have strong stomach acids in order to digest zinc, and a lot of people have digestive weakness or are under a lot of stress. You'll deplete a lot of zinc when you're under a lot of stress. So we're in a culture where I think people tend to be low in zinc because they're under stress, and maybe they've had inadequate diet or some other stress to their digestive system where they're just not getting enough zinc. So I would suggest 40 milligrams of zinc supplementally daily. If you prefer to get it from food, of course, that's great as well. A lot of the food-based forms that are rich in zinc include the things I just showed. They're also high in selenium, so that's a win. So beef, poultry, fish, seafood, pork, pumpkin seeds are notable for their zinc levels as well. Here's an example of a zinc supplement. And again, like selenium, I would take this during times of higher need, or if the individual shows signs of zinc deficiency, like they have adrenal stress. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. So besides those basic key nutrients, we want to think about using some superfoods that help increase our natural killer cells. Those are T cells that are created in the thymus gland, and they're really good at targeting and like being our first line of defense. Medicinal mushrooms are one of my favorite tools for this. These are pictured here on the left are medicinal mushrooms. We buy these every week at the co-op. We like to buy the lion's mane, the shiitake. This week we had oysters, so that's what I took a picture of. And I will typically just chop them up and fry them or saute them on the stovetop with some other vegetables or meat. You can also, I look like I'm freezing up, but hopefully you guys are seeing me. I'm gonna wait a second. Okay, looks like we're back on live. So you can also put mushrooms in soups and add them to various different meals, add them to omelets, lots of different options for getting good mushrooms. You can buy mushroom powders and add them to liquids. I like this supplement on the right. My community extract is another thing we use in our household. Mushrooms, besides having a lot of support for the immune system and a lot of beneficial nutrients, are also adaptogenic. So they help the body to adjust to stress and be a little more resilient. And that can be important in cases where people are maybe susceptible to getting viruses and then having a long-term problem or longer-term symptoms from the virus. So mushrooms are a great resource, and there's many, many different options out there. You can go to the farmer's market to find them as well. And there are a number of herbs that help with natural killer cell support. I really like Echinacea. Astragalus is another good one. And I'm sure many of you know of other herbs that help, and they're all really good. So I would encourage you to continue those unless you have a special situation. I put the picture of asparatox here because this is how I give Echinacea to my kids. Both my kids are very healthy. I have 2 girls, but they pass things back and forth, and they're also exposed to people who are sick when they go to school. And so these asparatox are just a great little supplement for kids. They don't complain about the taste, even though they can sometimes be very picky. And it's also very effective. So you can use this as a preventative, or you can increase the dosage and let them chew up the tablets when they are symptomatic. And it does help reduce the likelihood that an infection becomes serious, and just helps reduce their symptoms. Personally, I like an Echinacea tincture. There are a lot of Echinacea teas out there, but you don't get the same medicinal value from a water extraction of the Echinacea herb. You really do need a more medicinal extraction, like in alcohol or otherwise. So I love tea, but I would put this ultimate Echinacea, which is just a mixture of different types of Echinacea. I like to put this tincture in my tea as support. If I did get an early sign that I was coming down with a cold or a virus of some kind, I would take a lot of Echinacea. You're going to get the best resolution of early viral symptom signs when you take a very high dose. So, for example, with this tincture, I'd probably take 6 dropperfuls or 60 drops 3 or 4 times a day if I was very symptomatic. And many times, if you can do that in the first 24 hours, it'll nip it right in the bud. Can't give this talk without vitamin C. Vitamin C is very helpful for supporting overall immune functions in many different areas, and is also really helpful for kind of keeping the immune system under control, which is something we'll talk a little bit more about in the upcoming slides. I do find most people get adequate daily vitamin C using lemon juice and water, so it may not be necessary to take a supplement, although buffered C, different vitamin Cs, different food-based vitamin C supplements are certainly fine to use, and taking those can help a lot with reducing your susceptibility to ward off a cold. Vitamin D is just so critical to the body in many ways, but it's very important in supporting our immune system, because one of the key things you need to have in place to be less susceptible is strong barriers. Like, you can think of like your cell phone and how it's really nice that it has this waterproof coating, maybe even a, I don't have one, but maybe I need one, a plastic cover to protect it. On our bodies, we have healthy skin. We also have a lining inside our digestive system and inside our airways, inside our sinuses, that needs to be healthy. And there are a number of things that make that barrier strong and healthy, so that when we are exposed to things, because we all will be, can't live in a bubble, or I mean, maybe some people are forced to because of their health situation, but ideally we have to keep going at least at some capacity while protecting ourselves. And vitamin D is very important for keeping the junctures in the gut lining strong. So this is a diagram here on the slide showing a faulty junction in the gut. Something called leaky gut can make people very susceptible to everything they get exposed to. And I have a whole lecture, you can view it online, about leaky gut. But vitamin D is really important for keeping the gut junction together. And it's important for other junctions and linings in the body too. It keeps our barriers strong to viruses. It also does something called modulating the immune system, so that we get the response from our immune system that we want. We don't get a crazy, prolonged, excessive immune response. And vitamin D can be very important for the lungs too, which can be something to think about this time of year when we're more prone to viruses. Because of where we live in Wisconsin, we are, or I know some of you are actually tuning in from out of state, so hello. But the further north you get, the less vitamin D you're able to make in the majority of the year, because our vitamin D production depends on our exposure to the UV light. So for example, in Wisconsin, we're only getting enough UV light for good vitamin D production from like May to September. And the rest of the year, we simply can't make vitamin D, even if we were outside in a tank top all the time. And so we can develop a lot of deficiencies, and it's important to do things and take steps to make sure you don't become deficient in vitamin D, because it's so important for health. And in the literature with regards to viruses specifically, deficiencies in vitamin D contribute to acute respiratory distress syndrome, so more issues with breathing, pneumonia. Vitamin D levels below 50 are believed to predispose someone to more acute respiratory issues and result in greater injury to the lungs. There was a study that came out in 2020, at the end of 2020 in Spain, and they took people with the coronavirus who were in the hospital and gave a group of them vitamin D, and another group did not receive vitamin D. The group in the hospital that received vitamin D supplements all recovered and were discharged. The vitamin D supplement virtually eliminated the need for the admission to the intensive care unit, and there was not a single death in the vitamin D group. So taking a vitamin D supplement in this study had a very statistically significant outcome on people's livelihood who came down with the coronavirus. And a part of this is because vitamin D supports us in the early stage of a virus, but it also plays a very big role in the second stage, or the severe stage. So as I said, in the first stage, we've got activated T cells, or natural killer cells, that are fighting against this virus, and our body's basically just trying to block the virus from replicating. But once that ensues, if someone doesn't have a number of pieces in place to support immune system health, then they will develop a more severe infection, where basically the inflammation from the immune response to the virus takes on a life of its own. And that can become very dangerous and very serious. And the vitamins that help protect us in that second stage and make sure that our body just doesn't burn itself down are vitamin A, D, and K. These are all fat-soluble vitamins found in high-fat foods, high-fat animal foods. And they basically keep our immune system under control. So I like to show this picture of my kids. You can see on the left, they're just kind of going crazy bonkers. You know, they could make a big mess everywhere. And this is an example of when the immune cells are just, you know, hyperactive and not really under control. And on the right, we have grandma in the picture, and you can see everything is very organized. The kids are very well behaved. They're acting appropriately. And so what vitamin A, D, and K do, and there's many other things that help modulate the immune system in this way too, but they act like the grandma to tell these other immune cells, you know, this is how you behave. So in this way, these vitamins can really help with calming immune system issues so that they don't become serious. And this is applicable to any chronic immune situation, not just a viral situation. So some of the food-based sources, the best food-based sources of these vitamins would be oily fish, salmon, sardines, herring, mackerel. I suggest people try to eat these daily, or at least 3 times a week. And I find in my interviews with clients, most people are eating them much, much less than that. But these foods are the best way to get beneficial omegas. Yes, you can take a fish oil supplement, but it's not as good, the studies show, as actually eating the adequate amount of fish. And it's really the best food on the planet, in my opinion, in terms of the nutrient content and the ability to digest it. So I encourage people to eat a lot of fish and seafood whenever that's possible. Red meat that's grass-fed is also a great source. Liver, of course, is a great source of these vitamins, as are egg yolks. Vitamin K can be found in some of those foods too, and not everybody is aware of the benefits of vitamin K, but it's been shown in studies to protect the lungs and the cardiovascular system. And vitamin K helps combat a lot of inflammation in the blood and the blood vessels and the heart. So this can be very important when we see more serious immune system stress. Vitamin K can be found in emu oil, duck fat, so you can use it to fry up or roast your vegetables and your foods. It can also be high in aged cheeses. So I'm talking about vitamin K2, which is the fat-soluble vitamin. Vitamin K1 is high in green vegetables, but a lot of people don't have the genetics to convert the K1 to the K2. So we still do see people with vitamin K deficiencies. These vitamins can be supported by taking supplements. Like this is an example of a liquid vitamin D supplement. I'll use this for my kids in the winter sometimes. My favorite thing is to try to get them to use a vitamin D light, which I use. And this is pictured on the right. I use this lamp for myself instead of a vitamin D supplement. I stand in front of it every day with eye protection for 10 minutes. And I do this because the benefits to making your own vitamin D are greater than just supplementing with vitamin D. When someone's really deficient, it may be really valuable to supplement and try to increase their UV light exposure, either through the lamp and or having them go outside a lot in the summer. But initially, sometimes you've got to do both. But I use the vitamin D lamp instead of the supplement now because I have pretty good vitamin D levels. And it's kind of like having someone do your push-ups for you if you take a supplement. You get so many other benefits from making the vitamin D yourself. And so that's why I strongly advocate using a vitamin D lamp. And that's called a Spurdy lamp, and it is FDA approved. And you can just Google Spurdy and you'll find it on the internet. Probiotics are also really important. We think back to this idea of promoting healthy barriers. We have bacteria all over us and inside us. In fact, there's more bacteria than there are human cells in a human body. So you can take a probiotic supplement or get probiotics from fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi. And the probiotics, besides kind of preening our barriers and keeping our barriers nice and healthy, and they defend against bad things, they defend against viruses. Some of them even eat viruses. And they also modulate the immune system. So in people who take probiotic supplements or have high levels of good bacteria, they're going to be much less likely to develop serious infections or chronic inflammation because they've got all those good bacteria. This particular probiotic that I have pictured is a lozenge made for kids with specific strains to help with ear, nose, and throat health. So that's one that's kind of timely for the pandemic, but there's a lot of good ones out there. Probiotics are obviously a hot topic in the health field. And one of the most important things for promoting probiotics in your gut is just to feed them properly. We do see in studies that when people change their diet, they get off sugar, they change to a more whole food diet, that their bacteria shift. And the same can be said of people in very stressful situations, making changes to be under less stress. We find that their gut biome shifts and improves from taking better care of themselves. So a couple of the best foods for feeding probiotics are called prebiotic foods, and pulses or lentils or mungbeans are one of my favorite to suggest because if you've watched my leaky gut talk, you know that eating a lot of legumes and beans can actually be pretty disruptive if your digestive barrier, or if you have leaky gut, if the barrier is broken and you're having a lot of problems. But if you can soak them, I would do 2 12-hour soaks of, this is a picture of the mung beans that I made last night. Soak them and rinse them and then like cook them really well in an Instapot. These really small legumes, you can break down to the point where you lose the things that are aggravating to the barrier. So they can be included more on a leaky gut friendly diet or a paleo diet. And they're a great food for the probiotics in the bacteroidetes group, which is really beneficial. The other top food to eat would be foods in the cruciferous family. Cauliflower is an example of that. Broccoli, collards, cabbage. There's Brussels sprouts, many members of this family, but they're also a very good prebiotic food. So if you feel like your good flora need a little bit of boost, you don't have to eat a lot of these foods daily. Maybe working up to a half a cup of lentils or Mungbean soup, or a similar portion of cruciferous vegetables to make sure those bacteria are getting fed every day. It can also be really helpful to eat organic foods because of the glyphosate or Roundup that's in the conventional foods. This picture here is from a study where they took the amount of glyphosate or Roundup, which is a chemical sprayed on many crops, the amount that's found in one apple. So you see on the left, this microscopic, excuse me, picture of the cells in the gut lining, and then what happens when the cells are exposed to the amount of glyphosate in an apple, a conventional apple. And you can see all the holes in the right in the microscopic picture of the gut cells. So as we're exposed to these chemicals, they really can have a very degrading effect on our barrier system. And this particular slide was promoted by this company, Ione. I really like this supplement. I provide it through my office, and I've also seen it at the co-op. It is made from buried soil, and it really helps keep the gut barrier intact, even when exposed to some glyphosate. I mean, we're not, ideally, all of us are eating organic foods, and I certainly do try to, but there are some times when I travel, or, you know, the food is out of my control, or maybe there's just cross-contamination and there's glyphosate in the food, even though you're making the best choices you can, because it's in the environment now, it's in the water supply, it's contaminating crops, it's in the rain. So this is a supplement that I like to suggest. I usually suggest a teaspoon before meals to help with absorption and help with keeping the barrier strong. And it basically feeds the good bacteria and helps your gut biome to evolve in a beneficial way. So it's pretty cool. So here's a summary of everything I've talked about so far. We talked about the importance of vitamin D. If you're going to take a vitamin D supplement, I do recommend it with K, because the vitamin K helps basically minimize any side effects you would get from a vitamin D supplement. Vitamin A is similar. If vitamin A and vitamin D are in proper balance, then you won't have any negative effects of taking a vitamin D supplement, which is maybe not a big issue anyway, but something that sometimes comes up. So that's a good way to address any side effects. Vitamin C, selenium, zinc, the probiotic, and the ion that we just talked about. So these would be dosages that I would use daily if I was concerned about viral exposure. You could certainly start with these dosages daily if you had viral symptoms, and you could increase from these basic levels to help reduce viral symptoms. Now I want to move on and just talk about maybe just a few more supplements that I think work really well when someone is symptomatic. So we're not just talking about basic immune function and basic prevention of virus. We're talking about what do you do when you're really worried that maybe you're getting exposed to a virus, or you know you're exposed and you're symptomatic. Lactoferrin is one of the such supplements that I like. It's been shown in studies to stop viruses from binding to the cells and really helps reduce a lot of inflammation. So I would take 1 to 2 of these every few hours in a more critical situation. Like when I'm traveling now during the pandemic, I'll take this when I travel. Quercetin is another great supplement. I mean, it's just an amazing supplement for the immune system overall. If you've got histamine problems, headaches, sinus problems, postnasal drip, just highly reactive to a lot of different things, have a lot of allergies. Quercetin is a great supplement, but it's also really great in supporting the immune system when there's a virus, and it actually inhibits the process where the new viral genetic material is made. I like this formula, natural dehist, because it includes a few different ingredients that really work against viruses. It's got quercetin, it's got vitamin C, it's got nettles, the herbal nettles, and it's got N-acetyl-cysteine, which we'll talk about in a minute. I also really like resveratrol. Resveratrol is a lot like turmeric. I could have a slide here for turmeric as well. Turmeric really helps regulate the immune system and modulate it in the way that vitamin A and D and K do. It stops the replication of a virus. It's antioxidant. I think resveratrol is a good thing for people to take all the time, just like turmeric, and the two of them together are very synergistic. This is a picture of Japanese knotweed that is a good local source for resveratrol. And you can get resveratrol in powders and capsules or liquid supplements. Glutathione is another important one whenever we're talking about immune function. We actually store a lot of glutathione in our lungs, so they're finding that's very important during the pandemic to look at people's glutathione levels, and you can take it as a supplement. It's normally an antioxidant that's made in our livers, and it's recycled with N-acetyl-cysteine. So if you have a good diet based on grass-fed, nourishing animal foods, chances are you'll have, or seafood, you'll have pretty good glutathione levels, but our glutathione levels get depleted with stress and exposure to toxins. So the more toxins we're exposed to, like a lot of glyphosate or heavy metals or chemicals that we're exposed to, it's going to deplete that glutathione. Some people are very depleted. That sometimes shows up as a chronic immune system problem or as chronic adrenal problems. And so a supplement can be used in those cases. This is an example of one that comes with vitamin C. I've used this for my daughter. And just as an aside note, this is a good one to use anytime you know you might be encountering chemical or metal exposure. So like if a member of your family is going to have surgery, you can take the glutathione to help with detoxing the anesthesia. Or if a kid comes to me with high lead levels, they can take the glutathione to help detox the lead. Here's a picture of N-acetyl-cysteine. Typically, it's a sulfur-based compound. It's an amino acid, and we get it from eating lots of animal foods and seafood in the diet. But this can be really helpful against viruses and supporting the immune system. It has actually multiple benefits. I kind of like to use it just like I would use turmeric or resveratrol to help someone with keeping inflammation at bay. It's also really good for thyroid health, just many, many benefits. So this is another good supplement to take every day. And I usually suggest the 600 milligrams twice a day for people. If you knew you were exposed to a virus and you were symptomatic, you could take 4 or 5 times that amount in a day with good results. It might be helpful for some people if they get an infection and it moves into their airways and their lungs to use some additional lung support. So that's the purpose of this slide. Again, I've got the Echinacea, which is very good for the lungs. I like to pair that with a supplement called poke root, which is very strong. It's strongly antimicrobial, and you would only use a very, very small dose because it's toxic in higher doses. Like maybe you'd use a couple of drops per dose of poke root, but it's very, very effective if someone's got a chronic infection and they're not kind of on top of it on their own, if you know what I mean. Sometimes too, other lung herbs like mullein can be, or yerba santa can be really helpful if a person has like a jagging cough or they're wheezing. So there's different herbals you might want to think about using in a case like that for extra support. So to summarize, there are some key nutrients, vitamins, minerals, maybe even botanicals that could be in your repertoire to be shoring up your body for immune system. It's also so important just to get rest. I think most of you could agree that, you know, maybe the times when we have been sick or seriously sick have been times when we've otherwise been maybe more vulnerable because of something else stressful that we've endured. So I think it's just a good lifestyle practice to try not to get too far ahead of ourselves in terms of getting adequate sleep every night and making sure we're taking time for self-care, because that's when the immune system does its own work. I mean, when we sleep at night, it's amazing reparative work that's happening in the body. And so many times when people do get sick, it's just a sign that the immune system really does need somebody to just take a break and rest. So that's the best thing to do. And as much as you can store in the bank, that's a good idea. It's also very important to be moving and active and getting your blood circulating. You need that blood moving and circulating because it's what's delivering all these nutrients to the different part of your body and keeping you healthy. So you need a good balance of rest and activity. As far as the information on diet goes, there are some studies that show that a fat-based or ketogenic diet or using intermittent fasting with a regular diet can help reduce the ability of viruses to copy themselves and replicate in our bodies. And this is because these diets keep insulin levels low. So when we keep insulin levels low, because we're not eating sugar and eating a lot of high carbohydrate foods, then that keeps inflammation under control, and it's a much better diet for the immune system. So a ketogenic diet or intermittent fasting might not be right for everybody. These are definitely specialized diets, and people need to take care, I think, as they're approaching them. But at a minimum, eliminating sugar from your diet and getting some support to do that if you need it is probably the most important dietary step you can make. Because eating sugar does very much suppress the activity of the natural killer cells and make us a lot more vulnerable to that first stage of infection and that chronic, more serious second stage of infection. As far as specific foods, I would probably encourage people to eliminate sugar first, gluten second, just because gluten is in this day and age, it's been bred to be a very big molecule that very easily breaks down people's digestive barrier and makes them more vulnerable. And if someone is more susceptible to upper airway issues or lung issues, then I would definitely encourage them to eliminate dairy and avoid dairy as well. Taking a step back from nutrients and diet, looking at your light environment can make a big difference with your immune foundation, basically because the light affects melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that we make. It's a key hormone that basically protects the DNA in all of our cells. So the greater your melatonin levels, the less likelihood really for any health problem, but specifically viruses. And we think part of the reason why the coronavirus has been more serious for older people is that their melatonin levels are naturally lower. And children tend to have very high melatonin levels. So there's definitely something going on with our viruses in our immune system that relate to melatonin. And melatonin is something that we make in response to a natural light environment and a natural period of darkness. And a lot of us in Wisconsin right now, when it's, very cold out today, we may be more inside and not getting the beneficial light we need for the signaling of melatonin, and experiencing more artificial light at night when we normally would be getting the clues to make melatonin then in response to a more natural environment. So the blue light, the artificial blue light, is very important to block if you want to maximize your melatonin. And that would be a key lifestyle tip that I would give you. You can put a blocker, just look at your smartphone and look in the settings and find the blue light blocker. You can find it on your computer to reduce the amount of artificial blue light. A lot of the blue light from our devices, from our screens and our smartphones and our overhead LED lights will reduce the amount of melatonin we're able to make just because we're seeing that light. You can also get blue blocker glasses, which I didn't remember to grab before I gave this presentation, but you can see in this picture of me how they're shaded kind of yellow. They're blocking the blue light from the device. And you can replace your lights at home with incandescent bulbs or more redder LED lights rather than bluer ones. So all of this helps with boosting melatonin and also lowering cortisol levels, the stress hormone. So that's a good bonus. Another helpful light thing you can do, besides just going outside as much as possible, is getting a near infrared light bulb, which is red light and heat. You also can find red LED lights, but they're more expensive. I like this bulb because it's just $10. You need to get a heat lamp for it, like from Home Depot, because it is a heat lamp. But just sitting under this lamp for 20 minutes a day really does help boost melatonin levels, which will make your immune system stronger and more resilient. And this is a picture of my setup at home. I have what's called a biomat, which is pictured here under the red bulb. And it's just it's like a far infrared mat. So it's like a sauna, but it's a small mat that you can use at home. So if you have access to a sauna or have a sauna at home, that's another great way to support healthy immune system. The heat really helps with our lymphocytic, our white blood cell activity. And people argue that cold helps too. Cold helps with resetting our nervous system and glutathione levels. So there's benefits to cold and heat, and different people will find one more therapeutic than the other typically. But it's good to try to adapt to both environments. That keeps our body healthy. So I've got the summary slide here again, just as a review of what we covered with some basic nutrients to be keeping in mind, as well as maybe some more advanced support. And I'm happy to answer any questions.